this show on the road. Okay, there's somebody sent me a link on my Facebook page. You might want to check it out. It's basically World War WW3 updates with an S on the Facebook page. There's only two World War III update pages on Facebook that I found, and mine's one of them. And anyway, he sent me this link, and this link comes from the Inquisitor. Okay. Now, again, stuff I've been saying, when you start hearing the mainstream media saying the same things as the guys with the tinfoil hat, and I can't find my tinfoil hat. I think I lost it. Maybe somebody baked cookies with my tinfoil hat. I think there might be conspiracy against my tinfoil hat. Wow, that's deep. Anyway, so okay, so the Inquisitor is saying the things that you're hearing the tinfoil hat guys say, and you're starting to see it kind of busting through the seams here and there in the mainstream media, where they're just hinting at it and talking about it. And it reads like this: World War III. U.S. Congress declares war on Vladimir Putin and Russia over the Ukraine, claims Ron Paul. Now, if you don't know who Ron Paul is, he's one of the good guys for sure. But even if he were to ever become president, which they'll never let that happen. This is why people don't understand. Like, we get a flavor of politicians, and this is pretty much any country now, that you're allowed to elect. Everybody else is off limits. For example, Rand Paul, I doubt those guys will ever see presidency, just because they're not allowed to be elected. And if they did get elected, that would tell you that the system, at least voting mattered. But if they did get elected, they would probably knock these guys off, because these are the guys that would actually start the reversal process. That said, Rand Paul, before I get into this article, or Ron Paul, one man cannot fix the $18 trillion deficit of the U.S. plus the other 200 possible $1 trillion of liabilities that the U.S. has. Like, I mean, in fact, there's so much debt that you could build a staircase on $1,000 bills to take you to outer space and back. It's an unfathomable amount of money. If you were to stack $1,000 bills, $18 trillion worth of $1,000 bills, one on top of each other, it would take you probably halfway to the moon. I swear to God, or maybe even to the moon. Who knows? It's an unfathomable amount. That much money doesn't even exist on the planet. All countries combined. Okay, so that's going to crash no matter what. Now the question is, do we get into war before the crash, or does the crash cause the war? By crash, I mean the complete meltdown of the financial system. Global financial system, not just the United. Like, it's a mountain climber effect. One falls, we all fall. The United States is, basically the first mountain climber, so to speak, and everybody's hanging off of it. That said, other people like Russia, China, India, Pakistan. Well, I don't know so much about Pakistan. Some South Americans like Venezuela and Cuba, Iran, and other places in Africa as well. Have basically, they're jumping that petrodollar, US dollar, they're jumping that ship, and there's going to be things taking place in January where basically, think about if we have the International Monetary Fund, and I know I'm going to read the article, don't worry, but this is just kind of a prelude, because I haven't read this article yet to see what it says, but I have a good idea what it says, because I already heard some of the news about it. But anyway, the thing is that the IMF is losing. Okay, they're losing hegemony. They're no longer in control everywhere. So they can only do two things with the United States right now: is basically export debt or bombs. That's it. That's all they have. It's a death-based economy. Okay. Now the problem with that is another war is again, Obama's just been one war after another. They're pretty much, you might as well say, back in Iraq. I don't know why we're getting pulled into this one, why we go along with it. But again, they're all under the control of the same kind of banking system and stuff like that. So bottom line, here in Canada, there's a bit of kind of a strange thing happening where we're involved, but I think as soon as we cut and run, we're going to be running towards China, meaning basically economics. Even though the United States is our neighbor, we'll always do trade with the United States. But I think what's going to happen is we're already set up to accept the yuan renminbi in the clearinghouses. That again, our prime minister has been doing a lot of deals with the Chinese backdoors, so to speak. Not super backdoors, but backdoors enough through like big purchases and selling land and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, the United States is going to get hung out to dry with the U.S. dollar. A lot of people can't see it. Again, they have their jobs right now and stuff like that. But there are people that are starting to notice because there is no financial recovery. And because there's no financial recovery, we're pretty much in the state just before World War II, World War I, World War II, kind of the same formula over and over again. You got currency war, you got trade war, and then you have shooting war. And right now, we're somewhere in the midst of trade war, where we have sanctions against Russia. In the near future, we'll probably have regulations against China, not sanctions, but regulations through the deal that was made with Obama and the Chinese. But you have to understand, the argument here is going to be between the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership or the Silk Road Asian Pacific. But again, the world is divided into two regions, basically the transatlantic Anglo-American banking system and Eurasian Pacific system. And if once you understand that, you understand the two factions are fighting. So let's get into this article. World War III may have already begun, which is something I've already been saying. We're well into it. Just the shooting war hasn't started. In piecemeal fashion, according to Pope Francis. I mean, that's not a conspiracy nut guy right there. That's a pretty, love him or hate him, Pope Francis is a pretty public figure. And now Ron Paul, which Ron Paul has been saying this for a while, warning that the U.S. Congress essentially declared war on Vladimir Putin with the recent passing of Resolution 758, which calls for President Barack Obama to significantly escalate the actions of the United States in regards to the Ukraine war by providing lethal aid. How do those pants fit? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you don't think we're going to head towards a thermonuclear war, there you go. Remember, back in 2009, we're just going to kill the dollar. That tells you everything you need to know. How violent that's going to get. The genocide out of this is insane. In relation, reported by the Inquisitor, the pro-Russian newspaper is claiming that flight MH17 was shot down in an attempt to assassinate Vladimir Putin. Not to digress too far, but yes, Putin was flying on that day on a similar type of airliner, but not in the exact region. Okay, so take that with whatever you want. An idea that has been seriously proposed as a solution to the Ukraine crisis by former government officials. Okay, the government officials are agreeing with this. So I mean, this is not painting a pretty picture. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin claims sanctions by the Western world are an attempt to destroy Russia. This is true. Now, I know there's a lot of Europeans would like to see Russia destroyed. I know there's a lot of things, that the Russians have done to Europe and surrounding countries. Like my uncle said years ago, it took a lot of countries to make Russia. Stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of bad blood over there. Nobody denies that. But at the bottom of the line, if you could say yes, that the United States is trying to do regime change in Russia, yes, they are. But this is going to be a price. This is not overthrowing some ragtag rebels in a desert somewhere. This is overthrowing somebody in charge of some extremely powerful, nightmarish weapons that the devils are scared of. You know what I'm saying? So, 2 days ago, from writing of this article, the U.S. House of Representatives passed Resolution 758 with 98% of the vote. This means 98% of the House is for war with Russia. Just put things in perspective. While the 16-page document makes many allegations, the legislation strongly condemns the action of the Russian Federation under President Vladimir Putin, which has carried out a policy of aggression against the neighboring countries aimed at political and economic domination, and claims Russia has violated each of the 10 principles of the 1975 Helsinki Accords in relation with the Ukraine. The resolution also claims Russia has violated the ceasefire agreement specific in September Minsk Protocol and has provided military equipment and training and other assistance to separatists and paramilitary forces in eastern Ukraine, which said has violated the 1994 Budapest Memorandum and is a breach of its obligations under the United Nations Charter. Now, earlier in this article, didn't I just say how this bill allows them to arm the Ukrainians? You see what I mean? You got genocide being carried out by the Ukrainian military. They're not only just killing the pro-Russian sides, they're killing the pro-Ukrainian residents as well that are in the Donetsk, Lugansk, that whole region there. But you have to understand, the big prize is the Crimea. This is where World War III will probably kick off, if it kicks off on that side. The other side could be in North Korea. A lot of people think North Korea is most likely. North Korea has actually been quite quiet the past few months, although it's always a powder keg over there. But this is a very active powder keg that we're talking about here. Um, okay, so in response to the actions taken by Vladimir Putin and Russia, the U.S. Congress calls upon Russia to reverse its illegal annexation of the Crimea, to end support of the separatist forces in Crimea, and to remove its military forces from that region. Amongst the 25 listed calls to action, the one that was the most potential to escalate the Ukraine crisis into the brink of World War III is item 10, which calls upon President Obama to provide the government of the Ukraine with lethal and non-lethal defenses articles, services, and training requirements to effectively defend the territory and sovereignty. And as of now, and the United States has only provided non-lethal aid to the Ukraine, so they say, which includes in terms such as food, clothing, and medical supplies. Same here in Canada, we've been giving all kinds of stuff to the Ukraine. Apparently, nothing lethal, but again, they're not going to tell you if they are. Now, here's something that to keep in mind. Okay, Russia already had control of the Ukraine before they overthrew, before Poroshenko took over. The other guy there, he already had control over that. Okay, now as bad as it was for the Ukrainian people at that time, you can't argue that they're in better conditions now. I mean, people have the water cut off. You have over 4,000 people dead. This all comes on the back of a U.S.-led coup. This doesn't, and again, the Maidan protesters that the U.S. was, protecting and saying how they supported are still on the Maidan Square protesting, saying, hey, you know what? You guys, you all screwed us. People haven't been paid their, pensions. Water's cut off. The gas is cut off. I mean, the people over there are in a really bad situation. Now, the thing is you can blame one side or the other, but you cannot deny that there was a U.S. coup that happened on the Maidan Square during the Sochi Olympics, which with what happened there, the next thing that you got to look at is Russia did counter coup that. So yes, the Russians are, pretty much not in official capacity, but yes, they are sending support to the rebels. Now, what does Poroshenko do? He calls ceasefires, and then he runs. As soon as he calls a ceasefire, they start shelling the area again. And again, it's not so much that they're just killing the rebels. Again, the rebels are a very, very small part of that area of the Ukraine. Okay, but they're shelling their own people. They're killing their own people. So why are they doing it? Well, that's where all the resources, that's where the coal is, that's where all the mining is. Okay, that's where all the valuable stuff is. But most importantly, that's where Russia's naval base is. That's the access to the Black Sea for Russia. They need that. If they give that up, that's a major strategic area that area becomes non-defendable for Russia. So they're not going to give this up. It'd be the same as if Cuba were to invade the panhandle of Florida. You know what I mean? Like, it would be, obviously they would defend that, right? And yeah, so anyway, I'll keep moving. So again, there's no good guys here, so you have to understand they're all insane, all of them. Resolution 758 also mentions the conditions of war and the U.S. obligation under Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, that's basically NATO, which states that an armed attack against one or more of the treaty signatories shall be considered an attack amongst them all. So if Russia rolls tanks into Ukraine, although Ukraine isn't a part of NATO, if they're propping them up, they can kind of make that kind of really loose interpretation of Article 5 and say, well, we're defending our allies. In other words, we go right to a thermonuclear war. Again, Russia can't take NATO in its entirety. NATO might not be as big as Russia military-wise, combined, like tanks, planes, and stuff like that. But the technology advantage on the NATO side is much, I wouldn't say miles ahead of the Russians, but it's because the Russians are upgrading their stuff. But the thing is where the big miscalculation is yes, this will be a turnkey punch code hit button kind of war. And you got madmen like McCain out there, who's just as insane as Obama. I mean, these people are lunatics. 98% of them voted in favor of this. How much more? What more needs to be said of, an overthrowing of governments everywhere in the world need to take place? If again, this is about humanity. This is not just about countries now. Okay. So anyway, According to NATO website, Article 5 has been invoked once in response to 9/11 terrorist attacks in the United States. But back in September, Putin allegedly threatened Europe by saying, "If I wanted in 2 days, I could have the Russian troops not only in Kiev but also in Riga, Vilnius, Tallinn, Warsaw, and Budapest." So basically, what he's saying is he could, he could move his army where he wants. They're not afraid of NATO, and you have to understand the Russians are geared up, and armed to the teeth, ready for this fight because they know what's coming. That's all you've been hearing from Vladimir Putin. Now, whether you're saying, okay, there's a couple of ways you can look at this. You could say, okay, well, this is all a sham. They're all in on it together. So what we're just seeing is good puppet theater where Obama is pretending to be saber rattling with Putin and vice versa. That nothing will ever come about this. This is about just, putting on a good show to make NATO relative. Okay, fair enough. Let's say that is the thing. Well, then we have nothing to worry about. It's just a puppet show. Okay. Then there's the second scenario where it is, like I said, the Anglo-American empire, transatlantic empire, fighting with the Asian, Eurasian, Pacific empire. And these empires aren't one country. These are banking systems. These are economies. These are basically control, power, wealth, resources. League of 300 comes to mind, or Committee of 300 comes to mind, that type of thing. Some people call them Illuminati. Some people call them whatever they want to call them. I just call them really corrupt oligarchs, and they're basically mobsters. Again, stupid criminals sell drugs. Smart criminals get into central banking. It's that simple. So it's all about control. So that's just something to consider, okay? Now, Ron Paul responds to the passing of Resolution 758 by claiming that a reckless U.S. House essentially declared war on Russia. And they did. They just did. And again, nobody's asking, why are we in the Ukraine in the first place? They make it all about democracy, but if you've been following it, it has nothing to do with democracy. And no, if the people out there who think we're going to go to the aid of the Ukrainians, actually we're not. This is not about Ukraine. It's all about a war with Russia. So for the people over there that are waiting for, again, the Ukrainians are going to, I feel the worst. I mean, they're being played off by both sides, the poor buggers. They don't deserve this. And they don't care how many Ukrainians die in this process. And I'm not talking about the Russians. People know that the Russians don't like the Ukrainians, but or the government anyway. But it's the Western governments are not there to save the Ukrainians. They're there to take. They're there to put missile systems to surround Russia. They're there to get the Crimea. They're there to get the resources. They're there to control the gas. They're also there to basically isolate Russia and block off Russia. That's what they're there for. Okay. So I know also to launder the Ukrainian gold, or gold through the Ukraine to pay back other creditors. So the Ukraine has basically been really handed a raw deal here. Okay, so and you have to understand too, how many people in Congress or whatever, or in the House, sign this thing without reading it? Again, yeah. Zabod Beeblebrox comes to mind here. Yeah. Anyway. So Paul reads, the legislation was war propaganda that should have made even neocons blush, and scolds the House for provoking World War III with Russia that could result into a total destruction. It claims that no evidence of Russia's invasion of the Crimea has been offered, which is true. The U.S. hasn't shown anything, and instead highlights the tapes of the State Department's official plotting with the U.S. ambassador in Ukraine to overthrow the government, which includes U.S. Assistant Secretary Victoria Nuland, bragging that the U.S. spent $5 billion on regime change in the Ukraine. And it's true. This has been brewing for many decades. Okay. Paul also accused the U.S. House of foment of a march towards World War III, since paragraph 13 urges the government in Kiev to resume military operations against the eastern regions seeking independence. If Ukraine President Poroshenko is given lethal aid and a green light to restart his military assault on the independence-seeking eastern province, this move will mean many more thousands of dead civilians. And again, like in Iraq, I mean, it's the same play as in Iraq and Afghanistan and in Syria. It's basically prop up the other guy, and then basically you harm the people you fight in the future is what ends up happening. In the end, Paul may may believe that particular phrasing contained within Resolution 758 amounts to a poison pill, which are slippery slopes that lead to war. Um, do you think the Congress and the President Obama should send lethal aid to the Ukraine in the response to alleged threat posed by Vladimir Putin or Russia? Or do you agree with Ron Paul that Resolution 758 amounts to propaganda? Well, it's propaganda till they act on it. The thing is that they've put it into play. That's the thing. It's in place. So it doesn't matter if it's this president, the next president, who actually acts on it. It's that it's there to be used if they want to. Now the whole thing is will they? I don't know. It's hard to say, but I can tell you this: that if you look at the U.S. history of foreign policy, it's pretty darn bloody. And this idea that everywhere we go, it's because we're fighting terrorism and for the women and children. But look at how many people we kill in the process. I mean, and now Canada's pretty much jumped on that bandwagon with ISIS. And it's always mission creep. It's like, okay, well, to get into this country, we need to go into the next country, and the next country, and the next country. How about we just let those people decide for themselves how to live? If they want to live in the Stone Age, let them live in the Stone Age. But I'll tell you this. Going after Al Qaeda or whatever, and you have to understand, like these guys are, again, they're always basically given weapons, to defend against somebody of some, against the U.S. interest. Okay, so they arm a group, and the next thing you know, that group takes power, and what do? They become the new tyrants, and then we got to overthrow them. Mujahideen turned into the Taliban, and Al Qaeda. They're not diametrically opposed like people think they are. The enemy of my enemy, right? So yeah, they're tribal wars over there in the Middle East. And the U.S. foreign policy takes advantage of that because they know right after ISIS, the next boogeyman will be whatever. Difference is those guys aren't armed. I mean, they're pretty much contained within the Middle East. They really are contained pretty much within the Middle East. Okay, they're not going to go anywhere. That's not Russia. Russia's a lot different. Russia is very modern. Yes, their military, a lot of the stuff they have is older Soviet era, pre-Russian Federation, so to speak, stuff that's, not really going to be much, even in high numbers, not really going to amount to the threats that you think it's going to. But however, their newer stuff is as state-of-the-art as the American stuff. It's just it's not in as big a numbers. But the problem is even with that, even if Russia didn't have a military at all, it has nukes. That's the part you need to be concerned about. And yes, they would do it. The Russians, have been invaded enough times that, again, they don't want to provoke a war because they know that if they have to commit to it, it's an all or none. But the thing is everybody loses if they're not going to be overthrown. And it's not like it hasn't been tried. They've tried it through getting more pro Russian prime ministers and presidents out there and stuff like that. That would be more favorable to the West, but it always goes back to Russia. Always tends to want to stick to its own path, right? And you know what to tell you? Just let them. Just let them. You don't have to. If you don't like Russia, don't do business with them. Fair enough. Doesn't mean you should cause a third world war over it. And this is the thing of the lunacy. Again, McCain's out there, even though he's not really in power, but it's the idiots like him that are out there, particular McCain, he wants to be at war with another 15 countries. What? Like the guy's a lunatic. And policies like this can get us into, the craziest of situations. And the thing is when it happens, it's going to happen fast. There won't be a warning. No, you're not going to get a 30-second warning. You're not going to even get, you're definitely not going to get an hour's warning. And the whole nightmare of World War III will be basically over in an hour to an hour and a half. Now, some people get caught up on the ideas, and they've been asking me questions like, are our missiles faster than theirs? Well, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if the missile would take a week to get to you. It's when it gets there, what's it going to do, right? So that's all you have to really consider. So it's not a matter of whose technologies, who has the bigger bomb. It's the fact that there's tens of thousands of bombs on both sides. And under the MAD scenario, and a lot of people can't grasp this, but it was leaked out a few decades back or whatever, that how the MAD scenario works is not just enemies launching on enemies. It's allies also launching on allies in very limited number. Like, for example, the United States and the UK would launch maybe a missile or two at each other. and France and UK would launch a missile or two at each other. Germany, I don't think Germany has. I'm sure do they? Who else has it? Anyway, Israel would launch on the United States as well as UK. They would each launch a missile back towards Israel. That type of thing. So a lot of people say, no, no, that can't happen. That's the whole point of the MAD, mutually assured destruction. Nobody gets the upper hand. The majority of the missiles, like for example, China and Russia would launch a missile or two at each other, and then the rest would go towards the United States. India and Pakistan would obviously launch on each other. North Korea would launch on South Korea. They would definitely try to launch on the States. I don't think they have enough missiles to pull off the MAD scenario where they would launch on China as well. But China might launch a missile or two at North Korea. You'll probably say that doesn't make sense at all. Well, yes, it does. It's MAD, mutually assured destruction. Everybody kills everybody. Nobody gets the upper hand. You see what I mean? This is why policies like this, again, these are stepping stones that when you look back in history, you have to understand in the last great war, World War II, we ended off where the new war, World War III, will begin. Now, Albert Einstein was out there saying, after he split the atom, he said, you know, I don't know what weapons will be used in World War III, but he says World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. And I believe the man to be, right. Oppenheimer, when he saw the first nuke at the Manhattan Project, when he saw that mushroom cloud, he quoted a passage from, I think, part of the Hindu. It was something to do with Hinduism anyway, and he said, I become death, I'm destroyer of worlds. He'd realized, and it bugged him because he knew what he had just unleashed. And many of these scientists, they don't realize they're, just because you can, should you? Should you really be splitting that atom? Maybe you might want to, but I get the idea. Well, if we don't do it, the other guys are going to do it, But anyway, yeah, so World War III will just basically pick up right where World War II ended. And World War II ended with a lot of big firecrackers, right? Nagasaki, Hiroshima. So you have a guy like Ron Paul out there, okay? How he doesn't get elected, I don't know. And again, I don't think it's because the Tea Party is so radical that people won't go towards the Tea Party. I can understand government people not voting that way because they don't want to lose their jobs. I get that, but you have to understand, in the end, we all lose our jobs anyway. Look at Greece, Spain, and Italy. They're completely broke. They're tapped. They're downgraded. They just recently downgraded Italy. I think it was Italy. I think they just got another downgrade in their banking system. The system's failed, and when the system fails, they take you to war. That's the whole thing about it. They take you to war. And the people that will willingly go fight and die, this is where you need real bravery on the law enforcement and military, particularly in the military, is to basically stand down. These madman governments cannot get away with what they do without the use of military and law enforcement. Otherwise, they can't do it. It's the military and law enforcement that let this stuff happen. Yeah, I'm putting it on them. Why? Because they're the ones that, it's the pilots that fly the bombers. It's the and fighter jets. It's the guys in the tanks. It's the guys that crew the missiles. It's the Navy ships. I'm not saying you shouldn't do your job, but what I'm saying is when it looks like it's going to be on the brink because of a bunch of 300 people in this country make decisions for 35 million. Okay, in the United States, you have 500 people making the decision to go into a thermonuclear war or potential of a thermonuclear war for 318 million people. Okay, does that make sense to you? It makes no sense. Now is the time to stop it. Now is the time to get through. I don't believe we will because, mankind usually doesn't have a track record of doing the right thing to avert disaster very often. Usually, so I believe we will have this war just because of the way, people will go along to get along until it's too late. Now, after this war, does it start all over again? Most likely, it will. I mean, life goes on. It's just after the war, it's going to be, very few people are going to survive it, number one. And the ones that do, it's going to be brutal for the next 10,000 years for them. So I don't think we'll stay in the Stone Age very long for the most part, because things can be rebuilt. I mean, we already know what to build. It's just to build it, start off year one again. So year one starts off everybody's, basically back in the Stone Age. But we know how to make 2x4s, so we start making 2x4s and building houses. Okay, so now we have modern houses again. Okay, we need to communicate. Well, a telegraph is basically wire. Well, we'll figure out a way to make wire, and then once we make wire, we can have the telegraph system again. Okay, then figure out how to make hydro, figure out how to make, all that stuff. It will rebuild itself probably within 50 years. You'll have stuff working, but the masses will not be. Like the masses will be in the Stone Age. Uh, that said, and of course there'll be all kinds of excursions in between because countries will break up. Uh, Food will be scarce. So obviously the depopulation factor of it, you have to understand if Russia and the even if it's just Russia and the United States that launch on each other, it's still pretty devastating for the rest of the world. All the humanitarian aid that the third world relies on, and all the food that comes in from other countries, that won't be there anymore. So the third world is pretty much toast after this war. You know, uh, I mean, a lot of them will be, a lot of people will survive, but most of them won't. Like the majority, like we're gonna go basically cut the world's population in half because on everything. Species will go extinct. I mean, it's pretty apocalyptic. What's going to happen because of the radiation, right? That said, people that are probably most likely to survive are the people up in the Arctic. But if it kills off the fish populations, uh, that type of thing, who knows? So Article 5, let's go. Let's take it there. Article 5 is invoked for whatever reason. And again, Putin's out there saying, hey, look, it doesn't matter what excuse they're going to use. They'll use anything as an excuse. They just want to destroy Russia. Okay, so we know they want to destroy Russia. I mean, it's, is Russia the big threat? Yeah, Russia's, they're an empire. They want to build an empire. But they have been fairly contained for the past few decades. Okay? Now, the thing is again, because the world's divided in two, you have Russia and China. China is the real power that they're after. It's just Russia's the military side of things that the United States wants out, and Anglo-American banking system wants out of there, basically Rothschild banking system. They want to take out the Russian military first, then go after China, because the Chinese military isn't as powerful as the Russian one. They can, that's why you're starting to see in Hong Kong the democracy protests there, the umbrella revolution that's going on there. Again, funded by George Soros. The guy there that brought it there, the student, he was coached by the CIA. I mean, this is open information. But most importantly, you just have the insight of the mindset of the people running the United States. 98% of them voted in favor of this resolution. Again, how many of them even read it? Think about it. What would be worse, okay, if you had a madman that you knew was trying to get you into a thermonuclear war, or a blissful idiot that just signed it because it was a Friday afternoon and he just wanted to get home to his family and go have a few beers? Because it's so big, well, we have to pass it to see what's in it. Didn't we hear that before? Yeah, hello, Zavod Beeblebrox. Yeah, we're going to put an intergalactic highway right through your planet. Oh, you signed that? Well, I didn't really realize what I was signing. Unfortunately, this is one of those things that you sign it and it goes into play. You can't take it back. So, again, we really need to, particularly down there in the States, you really need to start calling your congressmen and stuff like that. Let them know, hey, you know what? If this thing goes thermonuclear, at that point you have every right to defend your country from enemies, foreign and domestic. I'm not making any threats, but I'm telling you this. During peacetime, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make videos to wake people up. Most will choose to ignore. And then even family and friends, they don't watch my videos. Why? Because it's a terrifying subject. Nobody wants to deal with it. But that's the problem with reality. You're better to deal with it. Why? Because then you can keep semi-control over it. Now, the thing is this. If it goes to a point where we're on the brink and we know we're on the brink, I don't think we're going to be given the warning. I think it's just going to be a flash-in-the-pan incident. Look, a couple of days, or not even a week ago, a Danish pilot nearly crashed into a Russian pilot. That could lead to, you probably say that wouldn't lead to a war. Well, it depends how the propaganda spins. If the spin is basically, hey, the Danish pilot was shot down by a Russian pilot, next thing you know, you have escalation. Next thing you know, you have troops that are completely paranoid whenever they see a Russian bomber. How long it will be before they shoot down a Russian bomber? Look, we had a British Typhoon fighter nearly shoot down a Latvian airliner because it was a Russian-made airplane 3 weeks ago from the making of this video. So, I mean, and then of course we've had pretty much a nuclear ballistic missile test every month for the past 6 months by the Russians. Okay, what happens if one of these missiles strays off course? Somebody mistakes it for an actual aggressive launch. You see what I mean? So it's going to happen fast. We're not going to see it coming. And the thing about that is, again, they're not going to, the only thing you can do is really definitely put food away. That's the biggest one. Other things is just, educate yourself on it. Keep some money on hand. Don't keep any more money in the bank than you need to pay bills and stuff, because what'll end up happening is, especially if you're following what the banking system's doing, and I think the banking system has more to do with this than just about anything, because that's what it's all about. It's about, if you control the currency, okay, you can control what's being traded, oil, natural gas, anything. If you can control what currency it's traded in, you have hegemony over that. Now, if you also control the resources or access to the resources, say such as the Suez Canal, such as the Panama Canal, that's why the Chinese, they're out there building a new canal. They're building their own. They're already, I don't think shovels have broken ground quite yet, but it's within the year. They're going to have their own bypass of the U.S. currency. And all the third world nations and BRICS nations are pretty much going to jump on board with that, because they know that the U.S. dollar is toxic. That means the U.S. dollar is going down, and it is going down. And the thing is the mainstream media keeps talking about this wonderful recovery. And, oh, look, we created 300,000 jobs last month. Yeah, but they're all part-time jobs. And a third of those jobs that were lost, or more than a third of the jobs that were lost in the United States, were full-time jobs, high-paying jobs. So now you have a massive amount of underemployment, meaning there's no way your taxes are ever going to be able to pay for all this socialism that they have, which is electronic bread lines, or even keep up with the wars, let alone the wars. So are they going to cut the wars first, or are they going to cut the bread lines first? What do you think is going to happen? Okay, so, and again, these bankers, they're so insane. Like, they're so insane, like they can't stop what they're doing. They're like a heroin addict. They have to follow it through until they overdose. Okay, the problem is the overdose here is, 100, 200 megaton weapon going off over a bunch of cities, in the numbers of the thousands. So again, whoever survives this is going to be, the luckiest unlucky person on the planet. You know what I mean? That's the thing about this, is that yes, people will survive it, but it's going to be a miserable existence for the next 10 years minimum, before people can even just kind of, it'll be 50 years before we have something semi functional, minimum, not to mention all the other bad things that are going to happen in between. So with that said, again, with all these politicians, which all seem to be leading us towards war, nothing we've been doing since 2010 has lead us away to war. The Cuban Missile Crisis was considered one of the hottest times in history, closest to a thermonuclear war. But it's not. It's just the one that was the most widely viewed. There are several incidents that nearly got us into a flock of birds were mistaken for missile launches at one point. Russia nearly launched on that. Another time, a black bear climbed the fence at a NORAD base, and they had fighters ready to go with nukes in the belly. There's several times that we've come close. There was Project Able Archer. The Russians were so close to launching on us, we wouldn't have even known it. It was unbelievable. So with that, again, just factor the human factor in there for sure. That at some point, somebody somewhere is going to do the wrong thing, and they're going to launch a missile out of fear. They're going to launch it out of bad intelligence, whatever, propaganda. Who knows what? No one knows exactly what's to be. At first, what you'll get is the silos will launch. Right after that, all the bombers will take to the air. Now, the bombers are usually not going to be right away. They're usually about a week later. But they'll probably go after, softer targets and launch from, again, a lot of these bombers only, they launch cruise missiles, with basically nuclear warheads on them. And they can be 600 miles from their target. Okay, you have Russia not even a week ago, or not even a month ago, having a Tupolev Bear firing cruise missiles, nuclear payload cruise missiles, while testing the missiles without the nukes on it, but a nuclear type missile that they tested within striking distance of Washington and Manhattan. Think about that. They were out in international waters doing this, but they could do it. So, so you have your launch. The slowest missiles will take about a half an hour to 40 minutes to maybe even an hour. The fast missiles will be probably, depending on, like, for example, if you're in the UK, it's going to be less than a 5-minute warning from the time you launch. If they told you from the time to launch you have 5 minutes to kiss your ass goodbye, that's what's going to happen. because of the proximity. The missiles are going to be from Russia to the UK, pretty much. You know, it's a hop over the border, right? So, but coming over here, the missiles will probably take between 15 minutes and an hour. Then after that, the submarines will, go to launch surface or launch depth, or they might bust up through the polar caps and launch, and they will launch probably about an hour and a half after. And they're kind of like the counter strike. So there's a strike, a counter strike, and then a counter strike on both sides. Then after that, it's pretty much all over. And then if there is anything left, maybe bombers come out about 2 weeks later to mop up some cities. Probably mostly non-nuclear stuff that they would use at that point because they wouldn't need to. Because you have to understand too, if there is if there is a winner out of this, okay, which would probably be just the people with the most population left. The win big is that because you've killed off 90% of humanity, 95% of humanity, whoever does inherit the earth, they get the whole thing. They get it all to themselves. Pretty crazy, huh? So, minus the small pockets that would fight here and there and stuff like that. So that's where we're at. So this is what Ron Paul's saying. Again, that's a pretty official guy. Again, he's not one of those kind of conspiracy type people. And unfortunately, they've done such a good. They haven't even really demonized the guy. How they deal with Ron Paul in the mainstream media is they just don't cover him. They don't want people thinking about that. Again, why are we in the Ukraine in the first place? Why is Canada involved in the Ukraine? To make it, they make it sound like it's a human rights issue, but it's not. Well, I mean, there is human rights issues there, but it's not. That's not why they're there. And again, even some of the people here are starting to question, like on TVO, they had the lady. She's like, I think the Ukraine's kind of, we're setting them up for a major disaster because they're in the belief that NATO is going to come to the rescue. That United States, Canada, England, and France and Germany and all those places are going to come to the rescue of the Ukraine if the Russians invade. But what the Ukrainians don't realize is they're not. They don't care if the Ukrainians get wiped out. This is the thing. Poroshenko is a puppet. Almost all the people that they replaced the government with, okay, they talk about the coup in the Ukraine by the Russians, but you have to understand it was a complete overthrowing of a legitimately elected. Even though they were corrupt as hell, the Ukraine's never been known for not being a corrupt place. You have to understand the United States with the EU and the IMF overthrew a legitimately elected government. They didn't allow these people to get voted out of power, which they probably would have been. Okay, and what would probably have happened then is that all the bloodshed could have been avoided. But you see, that's not the way U.S. foreign policy works. The way U.S. foreign policy works is order out of chaos. It's Harry Kissinger theory, right? Just let the people kill each other until there's nobody left and just go in and take up the resources. That's what's happening in Iraq. I mean, people think of Iraq's about terrorism. It's not about terrorism. It's about lithium. It's about gold. It's about oil. It's about all kinds of minerals. It's about resources. It's about opium. That's what it's all about. And when you understand that, that's when you understand what the bigger picture is. And that's when you understand how insane the elites are. Again, not every politician that's signed on to these things knows what they're doing, And you see it all in politicians all over the world. Most of them are actually just blissful idiots. The other bit are corrupt, but then there's just what I call the root core of evil. Those are usually a handful that are way at the top, again, above Obama. It's not Obama, it's the people that control him. And what I say is if we are lucky enough to get the signs that we are seeing now. Without the internet, we would not know about what's going on in the world today like we do. I'm sure we'd find out about it, but you don't want to find out about it. You want to prevent it. So at this point, again, where's the brave law enforcement military to step up with some good judges and lawyers and prosecutors to start putting these people in jail? You start with Joe Biden. He just basically explained how they use the CIA to send money to Saudi Arabia to buy weapons to send to Libya to arm the rebels, which led to destabilization of Syria, okay, and a civil war, which means genocide, which over 1 million refugees are now starving to death because the food can't get to them, okay, and this was all brought on by the West, okay. So if the blueprint there in Syria is the same blueprint they're going to use in the Ukraine, and they are using it in Ukraine. It's just the Ukraine doesn't have the tribal war problem that the Middle East has, therefore they can't capitalize on that. Yes, you have the Ukrainians hate the Russians and the Russians hate the Ukrainians. Okay, fine. And it's not all of them. Most of those people there don't want to be killing each other. That's why it's very, again, look at where the Ukraine is divided pretty much. Okay, it's going to be an east-west divide, and there's a lot of people on the mainstream media starting to say that we're going to end up with it like an East Germany, West Germany type of thing, because Putin, again, he can bleed this out for years. Because he's not stupid enough to roll his tanks into the Ukraine, but the thing is in official capacity. So, and again, the United States, again with the MH17, look, there's even what you call it, audio of the Ukrainian pilot that actually shot down the plane, MH17. I think it was a joint effort. I think it was a mistaken identity. Now, maybe they did think it was Vladimir Putin's plane. Who knows? I mean, Putin, being as crafty as he is, hear me out on this. Again, we're never going to know what happened there. Look, they're keeping it. They're keeping the investigation of the MH17 classified. If it indicted, if it pretty much implicated the Russians in any sort of manner, they would be blaring this and showing you all the proof. But they don't show you the proof. Why? Because there is none. So here's what my theory of what happened is, they probably thought it was Vladimir Putin's airplane and probably shot it down. So why did they think that? Well, okay, here it's a theory. I'm completely speculating here, but this makes sense. His airplane's flying back from, I forget which South American country it was flying back from at the time. Okay, his route, okay, I think was supposed to go directly over where this airplane went, over the Ukraine, right? They diverted. I think it was Peru or someplace like that he was at. So what they probably did is said, no, Vladimir Putin is on MH17. You see what I mean? So the Ukrainians get that. Then the Ukrainians divert, because the Ukrainians diverted the MH17 to fly right over the area it flew. Okay, this is fact. You can't deny this. They did that. They had the airplane lower its altitude. Okay, it's confirmed now pretty much by all sides there was a frog foot in the area. I'm thinking, again, MH17 wasn't responding. It had a blackout on the comm. Okay, so for whatever reason they couldn't. That's the part that people should be investigating. Is not so much the shot down, but the fact that why did the Ukrainians put it right over that area? And number two, what happened to the communications of that airplane? Kind of like MH370, the communications go out. So communications go out. The pilot tries to hail the airplane. Airplane doesn't respond. They assume it's a Russian spy plane or intelligence airplane, and they shoot it down. The other thing is maybe the missile system, which is still in debate, whether the Burke SA-11 missile system was actually Ukrainian or the rebels. But I'm thinking they both shot it down. I'm thinking the rebels detected the aircraft and it didn't respond, so they think it's a Ukrainian spy plane, and they detect the frog foot behind it, saying, okay, well, yeah, this thing's just flying up ahead, electronic warfare for the frog foots, because we'd already shot down airplanes in that area. So they launch the missile at the jetliner. They shoot down the jetliner. The frogfoot pilot assumes the launch is coming from the jet, and he shoots it down because he thinks whatever. I think it was accidentally shot down. But what I'm saying is we're not being told the truth. We're never going to know the truth. But if it was 100% the Russians or the Russian rebels, they would show you the proof. Thing is there is hearsay of whether the missile system, the Burke missile system was at a Ukrainian base earlier, and then all of a sudden it wasn't there. And again, the Ukrainians say, "Oh, we don't have these things. We don't have things." But yet they bought them, I think in 2010 or 2011. So they had these things. So, and again, the other thing is, did the rebels have these things? Who knows? Because again, equipment's getting captured by both sides, right? So we don't know. So we're never going to know. But it could be an incident like that that'll lead to a big war. So I guess I'm babbling on now. So this is just something, again, how fast it is ratcheting up. At some point, we have to have these people out of power. They're going to get everybody killed. I agree with Lyndon LaRouche. They must get rid of Obama, but they have to get rid of the people that control them. But that goes up to the banking system. This is where you need your law enforcement military to start arresting bankers. Start with them, because everything comes down from there, and put these people in jail. Now, the problem is that the economy collapses when they do this. So it's insolvent. We're going to suffer one way or the other. But I'd rather suffer in a post-depression than or post-collapse leading to a massive global depression than a thermonuclear war, Holocaust, so to speak. So these are our options, bad and worse. So I'll take bad. So with that, if we don't uphold the rule of law, these people will kill us. They're insane. They're completely insane. Obviously, I'm not calling for any violence or anything stupid like that. But what I am saying is, if you are a person that works in law enforcement or military, you need to investigate this very quickly because time is growing short here. And most importantly, just because they make it a law doesn't mean it's a just law. And if it's something that's going to lead to the extinction of the human race, possibly, I think you need to act on that. After that, I don't know what else to say. But anyway, leave it at that. So if you'd like to support the channel, there'll be a link down below. And thank you to everybody who has. Rate, subscribe, share, comment, like. Be true to yourself, be true to others, and always, always do the right thing. So have a great day, eh? G'day, hi, and welcome. Alrighty, so let's get this show on the road. Okay, there's somebody sent me a link on my Facebook page. You might want to check it out. It's basically World War WW3 updates with an S on the Facebook page. There's only 2 World War 3 update pages on Facebook that I found, and mine's one of them. And anyway, he sent me this link, and this link comes from the Inquisitor. Okay. Now, again, stuff I've been saying, when you start hearing the mainstream media saying the same things as the guys with the tinfoil hat, and I can't find my tinfoil hat. I think I lost it. Maybe somebody baked cookies with my tinfoil hat. I think there might be conspiracy against my tinfoil hat. Wow, that's deep. Anyway, so okay, so the Inquisitor is saying the things that you're hearing the tinfoil hat guys say, and you're starting to see it kind of busting through the seams here and there in the mainstream media, where they're just hinting at it and talking about it. And it reads like this: World War III. U.S. Congress declares war on Vladimir Putin and Russia over the Ukraine, claims Ron Paul. Now, if you don't know who Ron Paul is, he's one of the good guys for sure. But even if he were to ever become president, which they'll never let that happen. This is why people don't understand. Like, we get a flavor of politicians, and this is pretty much any country now, that you're allowed to elect. Everybody else is off limits. For example, Rand Paul, I doubt those guys will ever see presidency, just because they're not allowed to be elected. And if they did get elected, that would tell you that the system, at least voting mattered. But if they did get elected, they would probably knock these guys off, because these are the guys that would actually start the reversal process. That said, Rand Paul, before I get into this article, or Ron Paul, one man cannot fix the $18 trillion deficit of the U.S. plus the other 200 possible $1 trillion of liabilities that the U.S. has. Like, I mean, in fact, there's so much debt that you could build a staircase on $1,000 bills to take you to outer space and back. It's an unfathomable amount of money. If you were to stack $1,000 bills, $18 trillion worth of $1,000 bills, one on top of each other, it would take you probably halfway to the moon. I swear to God, or maybe even to the moon. Who knows? It's an unfathomable amount. That much money doesn't even exist on the planet. All countries combined. Okay, so that's going to crash no matter what. Now the question is, do we get into war before the crash, or does the crash cause the war? By crash, I mean the complete meltdown of the financial system, global financial system, not just the United. Like, it's a mountain climber effect. One falls, we all fall. The United States is basically the first mountain climber, so to speak, and everybody's hanging off of it. That said, other people like Russia, China, India, Pakistan. Well, I don't know so much about Pakistan. Some South Americans like Venezuela and Cuba, Iran, and other places in Africa as well. Have basically they're jumping that petrodollar, U.S. dollar. They're jumping that ship, and there's going to be things taking place in January, where basically think about if we have the International Monetary Fund, and I know I'm going to read the article. Don't worry, but this is just kind of a prelude because I haven't read this article yet to see what it says, but I have a good idea what it says because I already heard some of the news about it. Um, but anyway, the thing is this is that the IMF is losing. Okay, they're losing hegemony. They're no longer in control everywhere. So they can only do two things with the United States right now: is basically export debt or bombs. That's it. That's all they have. It's a death-based economy. Okay. Now the problem with that is another war is again Obama's just been one war after another. They're pretty much, you might as well say, back in Iraq. I don't know why we're getting pulled into this one, why we go along with it. But again, they're all under the control of the same kind of banking system and stuff like that. So bottom line, here in Canada, there's a bit of kind of a strange thing happening where we're involved, but I think as soon as we cut and run, we're going to be running towards China, meaning basically economics. Even though the United States is our neighbor, we'll always do trade with the United States. But I think what's going to happen is we're already set up to accept the yuan renminbi in the clearinghouses. That again, our prime minister has been doing a lot of deals with the Chinese backdoors, so to speak. Not super backdoors, but backdoors enough through like big purchases and selling land and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, the United States is going to get hung out to dry with the US dollar. A lot of people can't see it. Again, they have their jobs right now and stuff like that. But there are people that are starting to notice because there is no financial recovery. And because there's no financial recovery, we're pretty much in the state just before World War II, World War I, World War II, kind of the same formula over and over again. You got currency war, you got trade war, and then you have shooting war. Right now, we're somewhere in the midst of trade war, where we have sanctions against Russia. In the near future, we'll probably have regulations against China, not sanctions, but regulations through the deal that was made with Obama and the Chinese. But you have to understand, the argument here is going to be between the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership or the Silk Road Asian Pacific. But again, the world is divided into two regions, basically the transatlantic Anglo-American banking system and Eurasian Pacific system. And once you understand that, you understand the two factions are fighting. So let's get into this article. World War III may have already begun, which is something I've already been saying. We're well into it. Just the shooting war hasn't started. In piecemeal fashion, according to Pope Francis. I mean, that's not a conspiracy nut guy right there. That's a pretty, love him or hate him, Pope Francis is a pretty public figure. And now Ron Paul, which Ron Paul has been saying this for a while, warning that the U.S. Congress essentially declared war on Vladimir Putin with the recent passing of Resolution 758, which calls for President Barack Obama to significantly escalate the actions of the United States in regards to the Ukraine war by providing lethal aid. How do those pants fit? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if you don't think we're going to head towards a thermonuclear war, there you go. Remember, back in 2009, we're just going to kill the dollar. That tells you everything you need to know. How violent that's going to get. The genocide out of this is insane. In relation, reported by the Inquisitor, the pro-Russian newspaper is claiming that flight MH17 was shot down in an attempt to assassinate Vladimir Putin. Not to digress too far, but yes, Putin was flying on that day on a similar type of airliner, but not in the exact region. Okay, so take that with whatever you want. An idea that has been seriously proposed as a solution to the Ukraine crisis by former government officials. Okay, the government officials are agreeing with this. So I mean, this is not painting a pretty picture. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin claims sanctions by the Western world are an attempt to destroy Russia. This is true. Now, I know there's a lot of Europeans